Welcome everyone to this video. Today I have the pleasure of having Dr. Natalie Crawford on, and she is one of our top 20 Women in White Coats heroes. And we are so excited to congratulate you. So congratulations, Natalie.
Thank you so much. I'm so excited and so honored.
Yes, so we want to interview you today and just share with everyone a little bit about all the amazing work you're doing. Before we get started though, I just want to read people your bio so that they know a little bit about you. And then I'm going to ask just a few questions, all right?
Okay.
So Dr. Natalie Crawford is an accomplished reproductive endocrinologist, board certified in both obstetrics, gynecology, and reproductive endocrinology, infertility. And she practices in Austin, Texas. She completed her undergraduate education at Auburn University, obtaining a degree in nutrition science, and did her medical school at the University of Texas Medical Branch. She completed her residency in obstetrics and gynecology at University of Texas Southwestern and her fellowship in reproductive endocrinology and infertility at the University of North Carolina, while concurrently obtaining a master's degree in clinical research. Dr. Crawford values developing close connections with her patients throughout their infertility journeys and incorporates evidence-based medicine to help patients achieve their dreams of family building. She is passionate about educating and empowering women and promotes fertility awareness through social media and community outreach. She is married and she has 2 young children. She also hosts the As a Woman podcast with the goal to empower women through education, promote fertility awareness, and encourage women to pursue their dreams. So as you can see, Dr. Crawford is very, very accomplished, and we're so excited to honor you for all that you're doing. So what is it that inspired you along this path to help people with infertility and to also really take it to social media? And I know one of the things that us as editors, when we were looking at our top 20 Women in White Coat heroes, and one of the reasons you were selected was because on your social media, one of the big things you're trying to do is kind of help remove that stigma that surrounds infertility. And a lot of people don't want to talk about it, or there's almost like, the stigma about having fertility issues. And so we wanted to, honor you for really trying to help, take away that stigma. So what was it that really inspired you to start working on that?
So I went into infertility because I really love the science, but I love the patient relationship. And I started to find on a day-to-day basis, one of my missions was to educate each woman about her body and take scientific evidence and make it understandable. So somebody could understand how her body functions and why we do what we do as a fertility physician. And my younger sister is much younger than me. And so she's kind of my ideal demographic. And one day she told me, I wish what you were doing on a daily basis there was more of, because I'm a young woman in my 20s, and I want to have a family someday, but I don't know anything about my fertility, and my sister is a fertility physician, and probably what you do is really cool, and you probably have a lot to share, and you should put it out there. So she encouraged me a couple years ago to start just posting educational content on Instagram. And what I really found through that platform was that I could impact, one woman at a time sitting at the desk across from me. And very often I felt like I was seeing each woman a little too late in her journey. That if I could have empowered you with this information 5 years ago, you may have made different choices, but you didn't know about it because there's this huge stigma around fertility. And especially for career women, society really makes it so your professional life and your personal life are so separate that you never talk about it. So you just keep going professionally and you don't talk about when to have kids or how it's going to impact your job, even though internally you're thinking about it. But that separation makes it just more of a barrier to maybe having the family you want. So that really started to fuel me that if I'm seeing these women too late, can I reach them earlier? And how can I reach that demographic? And I felt like social media was the best opportunity to start. And so just trying to put really simple facts out there, trying to talk about fertility in common language and encourage women to talk about it with each other, that miscarriage happens to almost everybody. We shouldn't be keeping miscarriage into ourselves and suffering alone. That, most everybody's had friends who've had a miscarriage or gone through infertility. And these are things that if we want to be women contributing to empowering other women, we need to be able to be empathetic towards and understand. And I really think if you want to empower women, you have to say, hey, you deserve to understand your body. Like, what's your period? Why are you having it? When is it normal? What happens to your fertility? And then just ask, well, what's your goal? Because I really think there's so many different paths to parenthood. I'm not at all trying to say everybody should freeze their eggs or everybody get pregnant right now. But I think if you don't even know that's a choice, you can't act upon it. So knowledge is really power in this situation. And that's where Instagram started. And I expanded it to the podcast recently, mostly because I wanted consumers to have a little more control over the information. I love Instagram, but as you know too, it's kind of like what you put out there gets lost in the algorithm, and you can put something really powerful, but it's kind of random who may see it on a given day. And I felt like a podcast is a more structured format where if you want to learn about age and fertility, you can go listen to that episode. Or if you want to learn about your menstrual cycle, you can just go right to the source. So that's been a whole new adventure. I'm not tech savvy with a podcast, so that was its own learning, as you kind of know. But I've loved being able to reach people in that kind of focused education platform.
Yeah. And so what has been the response on Instagram? People following you there? What kinds of things have people been saying in response to what you're doing and what you're posting?
It's overall, Instagram is I find it inspiring and happy place. Most of my followers, send back positive feedback, whether it's sharing their own stories of life as a woman, sharing their own fertility struggles, or they're very thankful for some of the education or they're sharing it on. The podcast has been so well received. It's been really humbling, to be able to, it's a little more vulnerable than putting yourself in a flat written context, to be recording something and just putting it out there and just seeing what people say, but really seeing people share the podcast with their friends or talk about it or message me and say, this episode made my husband and I sit down and have a talk about our family planning goals, or this episode made me schedule an appointment to go talk about freezing my eggs. And so I think just touching that one woman at a time that I never would have interacted with has been so powerful and meaningful. Even if it's not, they're coming to see me, they're not my patient, but they're now feeling empowered to go do something themselves.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. So, and what, in your opinion, though, what are some of the biggest issues really facing women in white coats? I know you touched on fertility and being a career woman. I think for us as, women doctors or women in healthcare, we've spent so much time training and sometimes, delaying the onset of getting married or starting a family and all of those things. And so what are some of the biggest things that you advice that you have for women in white coats with regards to family planning?
When it comes to family planning, the number one thing I say, especially to physician women, is, you're used to planning out your whole life. You set big goals, you work really hard to achieve them. And if having a family is one of your goals, you need to address it earlier. That means you need to talk about it, understand what it looks like. Having one child or 4 children is really different in how you fit those into your life. Does that mean motherhood's really special to you because you want to see a piece of you and your husband and a child? Is that genetic connection, or is it just the act of being a parent? Just to understand where your goals are in the fertility space and to start talking about if they make sense for you. The hardest thing for me with fertility is that there's so many averages. I talk about numbers all the time, but for every individual woman, when it comes to getting pregnant, she either has 100% success or 0. Like regardless of what the odds are for her, she either gets there or she doesn't. And so those odds exist to help us understand where the averages are, but we may fall above or below those on any given moment. So if you're going to run out of eggs early and you're 30 but married and just purposefully delaying because you're in a competitive residency or fellowship, or you want to get a couple years down as an attending before you really dive into family planning, what if you are ending your eggs in that time frame? where you could have had the resources or the ability to make a different choice if you had known your time was limited. So my thought is that if having a family is important to you, you deserve to be educated on it, to get an evaluation of yourself and make sure that what you are thinking in your brain fits with what your timeline is. And if it doesn't, you can then reevaluate. And it's fine to make any choice to say, okay, well, I'll freeze eggs because maybe I'm running out of time, or I'll be okay with donor eggs, or I'll adopt a child, or I'll wait and see because I'd like a child, but it's not going to be the end of the world if it doesn't happen this way. But those are all choices that you get to make when you have the information. And if you don't have the information, you're kind of blindsided by it, which is what none of career-driven professional women flourish in that environment, right? We like to make a plan and achieve our goals. So to be blindsided by information late when a goal is not being achieved seems completely unreasonable. And the other side that I like to say is that we owe it to each other as women to talk about this, to not make this, and without judgment, to talk about it openly, to not care what other women are making as their choice, but to understand it. That way there's not a stigma if you're going to freeze your eggs or use donor eggs or adopt a child, or if you have recurrent miscarriages. When we keep all of this closed into ourselves, we're making it more of an isolated issue, which makes it harder for us to feel empowered in our career when we're struggling on this other side because we feel so alone.
Yeah, absolutely. I completely agree with that. We need to kind of open up the conversation and support one another. We need to be each other's, biggest support system. And I think, one of the issues I see, I think, is just, in the work setting, just kind of bringing up like, hey, I want to have a family to your colleagues, to your male colleagues, because sometimes they may not understand, or maybe they'll see that as like, oh gosh, like now I'm going to have to pick up your slack from when you go on maternity leave and all this stuff. So I feel like there's that issue too that comes in, and we're trying to stay focused on our career and, hit all these things, do all these things, but then we worry about how our male counterparts will perceive it or receive it.
I think that's a real worry, but I think the conversation never changes if we just don't even talk about it. So if we are just so afraid that our male colleagues are going to resent us or be burdened by the work that we never bring it up, we're not giving them the opportunity to realize this is something that's burdening us. Or impacting when we choose to have a family. I mean, I did it too, right? I mean, I did not have a kid in residency. I was purposefully waiting. I got a message this morning from an ophthalmology resident who wants to do a fellowship, but she's trying to figure out, when is it going to hurt the least to be out? Is it in her last year of residency? Is it in her competitive fellowship? Is it her first years out? And there's no perfect time. I think the reality is, I do think there is a lot of men in medicine who understand this burden and gladly will step up to it to support us. I had a co-fellow of the year above me who was male, and he was wonderful at that, just stepping in and helping carry that load, and never made me feel guilty about it. But unless we give the opportunity to men by talking openly about this, we're not going to help change the conversations for the ones that haven't even thought about it. Because especially single men who aren't in a relationship, who don't have a wife who may be going through this, they're never contemplating what this burden may be like. So it's up to us to change that conversation to make it relevant to them also.
That's such a great point. There are so many men who are supportive. And I remember when I was pregnant, working in the ER, some of the male colleagues would be like, don't see that patient, I'll take care of it. It's like a shoulder reduction or hip reduction. They were like, you're pregnant. I don't want you to have to do it, or like deal with a violent patient or different things. So I definitely felt like my male colleagues would watch my back or sometimes pick up my shifts for me when I wasn't feeling well and things like that. So there's definitely, sometimes we don't give the guys enough credit.
I think this is really part of, I'm really generalizing, but I think overall as women, we're pleasers, and we don't like to cause any drama, and we like to make people happy. And we become internally so worried about the burden we're putting on others, even if it doesn't really exist. Meaning, like, your male colleagues in the ER are happy to do those things because they want to support you, because, you're a good colleague to them, and this is important to you. But we worry and stress so much about not pleasing or being this extra burden or causing drama by not being there, that I think is a weight that women shouldn't have to bear as much as we currently do. I know I did, and I know a lot of my colleagues felt that way also, all this worry about when can you impact others the least. And I think that's kind, but in reality, you need to have a family when it makes sense for you, and you will have people who support you.
Yes, absolutely. So one of the other things I just wanted to ask, as one of our Women in White Coat heroes, what are some of the things that you could kind of recommend to other people who want to make an impact through their practice, through medicine, through, to their community, or just maybe on social media? What are some of the ways that other people can really make an impact the way you are and helping to kind of lift the stigma around infertility?
So I really think that having something you're passionate about helps fuel you and prevent you from feeling, burnt out with medicine in general. And that can be within your clinical practice, or that can be outside of it. For me, it's, fertility awareness. And that's not a lot of fertility physicians. A lot of fertility physicians just really love IVF. They want to explain that to them. But I really love this touching women earlier. So if you can identify what really fuels you in your line of work, and then not be afraid to put yourself out there. I mean, I remember my first Instagram post, it's like, doesn't show my face. It's like my waist down, like my shoes or something random, because it's so fearful to put yourself out there. And as physicians, I think we feel this extra burden about our persona and how we are received by the patients and the public, that I think if you stand behind the message you're putting out there, so know what you're passionate about, stand behind it, be consistent with however you want to do it, whether it's in your community, in your practice, online, and don't be afraid, because it takes a little bit of fear to fuel you to keep growing things. I mean, 2 years ago, I never would have thought I had a podcast. I'd be like, never, but I love that. And that's a great outreach for me now. So I think a little bit of fear is good, as far as it keeps us evolving instead of staying stagnant. And I think it inspires us. So I think that's different for everybody. I have colleagues in the fertility space who do a little bit different than I do, and they find immense satisfaction from what they're doing, whether it's, a lot of community outreach for infertile patients and miscarriage support groups, and really educating those type of things. So I think everybody has their own thing, but just identify it and then don't be afraid.
Those are some really great tips. Thank you so much. This has been such a great conversation. And I want to let everyone know that you're going to be actually one of our speakers at our conference, our Women in White Coats CME conference and wellness retreat, which is in April 4th through 6th. And it's going to be at a beautiful place called Chateau Alon, which is just outside of Atlanta. I can't wait to be there. And I think Natalie's excited too.
I know, I can't wait.
We can't wait to hear from you there, Natalie, and also, of course, see you at the Women in White Coats Heroes ceremony. And you guys all make sure you go online and vote for the woman that you think should be the hero of the year. And it's going to be all based on your votes. We're going to be announcing it at the awards ceremony. So make sure that you guys get online and vote. Go to womeninwhitecoats.com/heroes for the voting page, and womeninwhitecoats.com/events for registering for this conference. It's going to be amazing. Early bird registration actually ends on Friday, February 15th. So we'd love to see you guys there. It's going to be an amazing, amazing time. And we're all going to connect. We're going to have some wine. We're going to have wellness activities. We're going to get to hear from great speakers like Natalie. So we can't wait to see you guys there. Thank you so much, Natalie. This has been such a great conversation.
Thank you so much. I enjoyed it and can't wait to see you next month, or just a little over a month, right? 6 weeks?
Yes. All right. Thank you.
All right. Bye.